Good morning. Let's get this party started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another artwork by another one of my favorite artists of all time. Today we're going to be looking at Tyrus Wong, and we're going to be recreating this image, which was originally reproduced on the cover of Reader's Digest back in January 1970, but features, not explicitly, but it's basically Bambi, because really probably one of the most important contributions to global culture was Tyrus Wong's artwork, sketches, illustrations, backdrops, which formed really the look and feel of the Walt Disney film Bambi, which was one of the touchstones of animation history and art history in general. One of the most successful movies of its time, and a beloved movie by generations. And Tyrus Wong is largely responsible for the way that film looked, and all of his artwork was used to inspire the rest of the animators on that project. He also did all sorts of other work for all sorts of other Hollywood movies, but really Tyrus Wong is arguably the most important and influential Asian American artist of all time. There have certainly been lots of other Asian artists who've been probably far more well known than Tyrus Wong, but in terms of North American art history, this is the guy. So let's get into it, and let's look at the plan for today's class. We're going to get the outline onto the or we're going to do an image transfer, or draw the outline if you want. Then we're going to stain it with some color. Then we're going to talk about who Tyrus Wong was, where he was from, and all of the hurdles he had to overcome. And then we might do a little bit of an underpainting, and then we're going to spend some time on the background, and then foreground. Ideally, we can get the background done all in one pass. I'd like to think today's one of the more straightforward paintings, but if I can get it done under 3 hours, that would be great. So we'll see how it all goes. Okay, and if you're watching for the first time, please like the video right now, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when future videos are taking place. I'm not usually doing a video on Thursdays, and I don't usually do one on Thursday mornings. So if you want to know when these kind of oddly timed videos are happening, that notification bell is your best friend. And if you want to support the channel with a small donation, consider using PayPal. You can leave a $1 donation, a $500 donation, whatever feels work for you. You could donate through Super Chat, although they take about 40% of your donation. So you can also use email and send an e-transfer that way. That's actually, it only costs about $1 to do so. I feel like a little plugged up right now. I think that will go away once we start working on today's artwork. Okay, so what we want to do to get started is get an image onto the canvas. Now, today's, the way that today's painting was painted, you could draw this out, but if you want a kind of a quicker way to do it, join the Facebook group. If you haven't already, take a photograph of what you're doing, upload it to the group, and get free feedback from all sorts of other artists just like yourself, as well as once a month I go through this and give free feedback to anybody who's interested in participating. So there's a link to a Dropbox folder in the description below, and at the very top of that folder are basic resources that you can use to get started in acrylic painting. And then the next 100 or so folders are for a little bit easier paintings, and I've classified today's painting as one of those that I think even a beginner artist can do. There are much more here's the Mona Lisa right there. I mean, you could see tons of work by people maybe you recognize or don't recognize. So a lot of these are some of the most important artworks of all time. So we're going to go in here into this folder, Tyrus Wong, and Z22 or Z22, depending on how you pronounce it. And you'll see these 3 files in here. We've got 2 versions of the outline, and then there's 1 version of the original. So there's your outline, or sorry, there's the original, and then here's the outline. All right, so once we've printed that out on your inkjet printer at home, right, we can take that and then we're going to tape it down to this canvas. Now this is a 9x12 sized canvas panel or canvas board, and they usually come wrapped in plastic. I take the plastic off and then I apply a layer of acrylic gesso, of white acrylic gesso, and then I sand it down, and then I get this super smooth surface, which I really like. Some people really like texture on their canvases, and panels, or paper. Personally, I'm not so interested in that, but so if you don't like texture, then you can use that technique that I've just described. But if you love texture, then you don't have to, you can just skip that step entirely. Okay, so I've taped that down, and now I'm going to use some carbon transfer paper, although technically this is graphite transfer paper. I just ran out of the carbon paper, so I put this in there instead. And then I'm going to put this face down in there. It's kind of hard to tell right now because you can see this. I've used this many, many times. So this might be one of the last uses I can get out of this carbon paper. And if you're, it's always a good idea just to check and just to see, does that line in fact come across? There it is. And it's not so bad either, right? That works. I'll talk about that book here in a moment. Okay. I'm also not going to draw all of these lines because I think part of this artwork, there's a kind of fun, spontaneous quality to the way that Tyrus Wong painted it that I think we want to try to capture. And so kind of keeping it a little bit open, I think is ideal here. So you'll see basically I'm just going to do the outlines for the tree itself, and then I'll do the painting of the leaves on top kind of a little bit more spontaneously, which means that this might look a little bit different than the original. But I guarantee you that if Tyrus Wong tried painting this artwork again, it would probably turn out a little bit different as well. So we have this star in the sky that the deer here, maybe the full-grown Bambi, is observing. And just a few of these rocks down here, and we will be ready to go. So the grass is something we can kind of improvise a little bit, but the structure of these rocks is maybe a bit more important. So we'll just take a look. That's what we've got. I think I'm happy with that. Again, you could see that I didn't bother doing all the outlines of the leaves. You could, but I think I've got enough there for me to work with. And again, these outlines aren't there for you to copy religiously and to worry about getting it just a fraction wrong. It's just there to help get this painting started so that we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to measure and get things in the right place. Boom, they're in the right place. Let's move on. Okay. Let me just that up. Okay. Oh, look who's in the chat. There's Paula, and there's Linda. There's Abdul Bostinjan. Says, good evening. Deborah says, good day from Gatineau. Oh, got a sick doggy. Oh, little doggy hurt a hind leg. Oh my goodness. Sick pets, hurt pets. That's the worst. Okay. So let's get ready for our next step here. And so step number 2 here, once we've got the drawing on the canvas, is to put a stain, a little bit of color on top of it. Now, you don't have to do this. I think I really like this step, but maybe it's even worth just sort of checking and looking at the original artwork by Tyrus to see if we can see how he proceeded on this painting. I would bet, just looking quickly here, that he's probably just painting directly onto a white surface. So you could definitely skip this step, but since I've been doing this for many paintings, I'm almost tempted to do a blue Imprimatura. Do I want to do that? No. Maybe today, maybe let's do a completely different approach. Why not? So this, because yeah, okay, so what I've just done here is I put some of my cool blue, and if you're wondering what that means, what that cool blue means, well, let's just sort of do a little diversion here and talk about the palette, the colors that I'm about to use. So I like to use what's called a split primary palette, and that means we have 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. So we've split those quote-unquote primary colors in half, because every color has a color temperature. Some are warm and some are cool. Some are lukewarm or luke-cool. But what I've done is chosen colors that are a little bit further away, a little bit more hot and cold from one another, because we can always mix them together to get the colors in between. So this split primary palette, I didn't invent it. It's been around for thousands of years, but certainly it's never been easier to do it than it is today. We can also use these 6 colors, or really just 3 of them, to mix our own black. Here's the recipe for that. Now, you could certainly buy your own black and use that, but you'll need these 3 colors plus white. And the brand of paint that I'm using here is Amsterdam. I'm not sponsored, not paid, not given any free supplies or anything. I buy them just like yourselves. So typically I use this warm blue to do this first step, but I'm going to instead, just for fun, switch it up and use the primary cyan that Amsterdam makes. So this cyan color, another version might be a cerulean blue, which is what Golden Paints uses, right? Or that would be what I would suggest you use if you use Golden Paints, or Winsor & Newton, or Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supply, Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Daler-Rowney, Fevicryl, Nova Color, Chroma Color, but not Museum Color. The reason I don't recommend them is there's kind of a significant amount of titanium white that they've mixed into all these colors that make it impossible to get a black. You'll only be able to mix a gray if you use those colors. Okay, so now that we've got some paint on here, we're just going to add a little bit of water. And I'm going to mix this up. Now, typically, this is really the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylic paint, because the more water you use, the more you're breaking down the bond of the paint. And instead of water, you probably want to use a medium, which is basically just clear acrylic paint with maybe another chemical or two in there. Now, the reason I put water in at this stage is that water works really well as to help this paint stain the canvas. This technique called the Imprimatura has been around since the Renaissance, and maybe even earlier than that. And it's a great way of just getting the painting started. Typically, artists historically have used a rusty red color, and even myself, I typically use that warm yellow. The reason I'm just going right to the blue today is when we just looked at the original, I noticed he definitely did not do a color. I mean, Tyrus Wong is both known as a painter and an illustrator. And illustrators, especially if you're working for, like Walt Disney, as Tyrus did, might see the Imprimatura as like an unnecessary step. Because after all, most of the time illustrators are creating things that are going to be used on camera or printed in books and magazines, rather than making something that's going to go directly onto a wall of a home or art gallery, museum, etc. So it doesn't have to have that extra little bit of layer of complexity that the Imprimatura lends a painting. It doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just means that because it's just going to be photographed and reproduced, that little bit of an extra step isn't going to really come across very well. So in this sense, I'm just going to skip it or replace it with this blue, which we're going to paint over top of again anyway. And I've chosen my cool blue because this is in the background for this painting, and we're going to paint another layer of cool blue over top of it anyway. And also it's just kind of fun to switch things up a little bit. All right? Okay. So let's move to... In fact, I just want to see how close these two look together at this point. It's interesting, even just looking at that, this does make this sky appear warmer. Excuse me. I think when we see this cool blue on here, and then you see the blue in the original Tyrus Wong, what originally might have appeared to be very cool looks much warmer all of a sudden. So we can add warm blue over top, but I think I'm going to still kind of keep it a little bit cooler anyway, to keep it in the background, and then we'll put warmer blues down here. Okay, so while this is drying, let's talk a little bit. Let's move here. Okay, while this is drying, let's talk a little bit about Tyrus Wong and who he was and why he was such an important artist, and especially such like a groundbreaker, smasher of ceilings, of glass ceilings, for so many different people. Okay, just clean that brush. So, where should we go? Where's my... Okay, so Tyrus Wong is born in Taishan, China, in 1910 and dies in 2016 at the age of 106. And just thinking about that, that probably makes him, of all the 200 or so artists that we've covered, probably the artist who lived the longest. Some artists famously or infamously pass away at a young age, and some live longer, and some live pretty darn long, into their 90s, but 106. He certainly lived a long and successful life with many different periods of interests, and accomplished many different things. So let's kind of start off here. And I think I have a Google map here just showing roughly where the area in which he was born, which is in southern China here, kind of near Hong Kong, and or some other big cities nearby. So there's Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen. So let's zoom out. Gives you an idea here where we are. Taiwan nearby, Vietnam on the other side. So Tyrus Wong, born into a family of relatively modest means, and like a lot of people of that particular period of time, saw the United States as a way of rising up and making, providing a little bit more for the family. So the Tyrus Wong's father and Tyrus himself get on a boat, the SS China, and sail to California in 1919, right before New Year's. And unfortunately, they left their sister and mother, or the father left his wife and daughter in China, and that was the last time that the family was ever together. So right at the beginning of his young life, there's this kind of traumatic, probably didn't realize or think it was traumatic at the time, probably thought maybe they would see one another shortly, but that's the kind of the sad maybe beginning to the story, is that once they leave, they never see one another ever again. And once they arrive after this month-long journey across the Pacific Ocean to California, they are detained on Angel Island, which was like like Ellis Island on the East Coast in New York City. And Angel Island was where immigrants from around the world, or from the west of the United States, were checked in, had to pass through there. So this is just off the outside of San Francisco. And one of the terrible things about not just American history, but Canadian history as well, is the way that Chinese people, Indian people, to a lesser extent Japanese people, were treated. There was a Chinese Exclusion Act, which basically was a way of trying to prevent Chinese people from immigrating to the United States. We had something similar here in Canada at that time, despite the fact that famously Chinese people built, at least in Canada, the railway, the transcontinental railway, and were just used to run into a mine shaft with a stick of dynamite, and they were just sacrificed. It's a terrible, terrible moment in Canadian history. I'm not sure if it wouldn't surprise me if there were similar incidents like that in American history. But obviously the role of this type of law was to encourage more white people to move to the United States rather than people of color, right? So one of the ways around this law was that people who were already living in, Chinese people who were already living in the United States would sort of forge documents and sell them to Chinese people that they probably did not know, that might have shared a similar name or hometown, that kind of thing. And these things were called paper sons, right? So this idea that you would you'd say, oh yeah, I've got a relative in San Francisco, and we have the same last name, we're from the same place in China. And so after and often sometimes there were scams, So a lot of people were taken advantage of and lost their life savings. But fortunately for Tyrus and his father, after being separated and detained for a month, they are eventually admitted into the United States, and they make their way to Sacramento, which is now the capital of California in the north. And they stay there for a short while before eventually moving down to Los Angeles, which had a much larger Chinese population. And during that time, it's a period of struggle. You know, being an immigrant to any country is difficult, you know, especially when you don't speak the language, as Tyrus and his father did not. So they had to sort of take whatever jobs were available to them. And that meant that, you know, despite the fact that Tyrus started showing interest in drawing, they couldn't afford a teacher. They couldn't afford to go to like after school classes or any private study or anything like that. But one of the ways that Tyrus was able to explore his interest was through calligraphy, right? A very, you know, ancient traditional form of art in Asia. And so his father, who had also taken classes like this as a child, taught him and encouraged him every night to pick up the brush and to practice his calligraphy. And I think that connection to, you know, traditional Chinese art and craft, as well as just that practice of using the brush over and over, plays both a major role in the kind of art that Tyrus ends up making, but also I think gave him a sense of belonging and meaning and connection to his roots, right? Which, when you're kind of displaced and you feel kind of a little bit lost, you're in this new place that is definitely not welcoming, that would have probably been a really important part of his daily routine. So while he's attending school in Pasadena, California, which is just north of, you know, like a 10-minute drive north of downtown Los Angeles, and also where I went to art school at the Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena, which is right next to the Rose Bowl. So Tyrus is studying at Benjamin Franklin Junior High. I didn't teach there. I taught at many different schools in the what is it, in not just LA County, but the greater Los Angeles metropolitan area, I guess you would say, when I was living down there for a decade, just over a decade. But so he attends the school, and his teachers notice that he's by far the best art student in the class. He's just outshining everybody else. So what is really beautiful is that his teachers encouraged his desire for art and his interest in that, and eventually supported him to apply and eventually win a full scholarship to Otis College and Otis Art Institute. I think it's now changed Otis College of Art and Design, which probably at the time was located right down there in MacArthur Park, right on the edge of the park, which is, there's a song, MacArthur Park, if you've ever heard that, which is, you know, maybe a 20-minute walk from downtown Los Angeles, where the Staples Center is today. And so, you know, he flourishes while he's at Otis. He takes illustration classes, painting, drawing classes, I think a ceramics class as well. And so he's one of the top students at Otis, again, despite being one of the only Asian students in his class. And but, you know, his family is, you know, him and his father are still, you know, doing anything they can to scrape through and make ends meet. So while he's a student at college, he is also the janitor at the college. So, you know, after classes end and everyone else goes home, Tyrus Wong picks up the mop and goes and cleans up after everyone else. And man, that, like, when I think of that, that is dedication, right? To be someone, I mean, because that, I can just think about how I don't want to say degrading, because I don't think being a janitor is a degrading task. I just think, you can imagine being, I think he started when he was 14, so goes in there very early, which probably wasn't super uncommon at the time. But, if you're in a classroom full of mostly white kids and you're the one person who looks different than everybody else, and then when everyone is getting on the bus or walking or going for a beer afterwards, and you're putting on your overalls and going to the basement to get the mop ready, and man, that would have been tough. And I have a huge amount of respect, incredible amount of respect for someone who, I mean, he didn't really have a choice, but again, I mean, the story of Tyrus Wong is sort of one challenge after another, trying to overcome bitter racism at the time, which unfortunately, in 2023, the time I'm recording this, is still live and well. But yeah, that blows me away. So a few other things. So he graduates from there, and there's sort of dispute as to exactly when he graduates, 1930, 1932, 1935. But let's say in the early 1930s, he finishes school and starts, trying to exhibit his artwork and sell his artwork. And so he has a few little exhibitions throughout the city. But again, being a Chinese person, probably, besides being maybe a curiosity to the dominant, white, upper middle class, people who are buying art, there's probably few opportunities to really sell that work. So he really starts sort of putting his talents to whatever, use is possible. He paints murals. He makes greeting cards. He works for a time at Hallmark, making greeting cards for them. He did basically. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's a list on here of all the different jobs that he had, but he's sending out portfolios and resumes every day, pounding the pavement. There's still this beautiful mural here in Chinatown that Tyrus did, that eventually fell into disuse, but was repaired in the 80s. And let's see if we can just see. Now, I'm not exactly sure where that mural is. This building looks super familiar, though, because as I said, I used to live in Los Angeles, and so if anybody knows the location of the Tyrus Wong, in fact, let me just do it quick. Okay. United Savings Bank, okay. Oh, there's probably 1,000 of them. Let's see. I'm sure this is all super fascinating. I don't think this is going to be the right one. This might not be. Yeah, because Chinatown. This looks like that's a big tower. I wish there was another photo here. Oh, there's another image. That is beautiful. Look at that. Ah! Wow. That is cool. Man, now I feel like that would be a really fun painting to do as well. Wow, that is gorgeous. Okay, well, let's move on. That is really cool. But one of the things he ends up doing is Tyrus gets hired to do some sketches and storyboards for Walt Disney. So one of the roles that an artist can have in really any movie is, after a script is written, that script is usually given to a production artist who reads the script and then tries to come up with some suggested visuals to help kind of develop the look and feel, so that those can be given to a director who can then really start to visualize what the movie's going to look like. And often there's sort of a lot of back and forth. The director might have some notes and like, no, I don't like that look. Let's maybe do that from the top down. And then, you know, storyboard artist or production artist comes up with some different visualizations. So that is one of the things that he begins doing for Walt Disney. And, you know, back in the day, the majority of people working in Hollywood doing really any of the creative work are all white people. So you might have a few Chinese people, Chinese American people, you know, Japanese American people, African American people working on the set, getting coffee, building, you know, some of the sets, you know, that kind of driving. But it would have been very rare for there to have been any person of color in the room coming up with these ideas, which is, again, it's hard to kind of, I don't want to overstate it, but the fact that he is invited into those spaces tells us really all we need to know about his quality, that he is so talented, so capable, probably also so fast at working that, you know, it's a no-brainer that people around him have to like overlook the fact that he looks different than everybody else because he's just so good at what he's doing. So really his breakthrough is that he creates these pastel and watercolor images for the new film that Disney is producing called Bambi. And Bambi becomes one of the huge hits for Walt Disney. It's, I mean, I remember, I'm sure it's probably a rite of passage for every child to see. It's also, you know, it was shocking for its time because, what is it? I don't want to spoil it. For spoilers ahead, as they say. Bambi's mother. Bambi is the baby deer, the white-tailed deer. His mother is shot, I think, by a hunter early in the film, and I think it's sort of done a little bit off camera, but it's still shocking. It was shocking for adults and traumatizing for children. And so probably something that would be handled much differently if they were to remake Bambi today. And I'm sure Disney's working, as they've been doing, redoing all of these classic animations as live action films. But probably would be handled a little bit more delicately, because I think one of the shocks of that movie is just like, whoa, my goodness, that is... let me see. So, in June 2008, the American Film Institute listed Bambi as the third greatest animation in American film history, or actually probably global film histories. And it's been added to the National Film Registry, Library of Congress. Oh, and here we are. In January 2020, Disney announced it was going to make a computer-animated remake of Bambi, so we'll stay tuned for that. But, again, super important movie, and let's see if we have some of the images of... Come on, sorry, let's... So most of the stuff, if you do look up Tyrus Wong and his artwork online, are the images of that he did for Bambi. And so not only did he do these illustrations, the concept sketches for Bambi, but he also painted a lot of the backgrounds. And it might be worth going back and watching Bambi, because I think it's amazing that, you know, it's probably the first time that most, you know, Western audiences, you know, had been exposed to Chinese art, probably without them knowing. You know, yes, maybe obviously there were some collectors and art aficionados who were very well aware of Chinese art history and Chinese art, but for the vast majority of Americans, probably had never seen any of like Chinese brush painting, watercolor work, ink work before. And so that features primarily in the backgrounds of throughout the entire movie. And so the look and the feel and the energy that's in that art is purely as a result of the inspiration of this great artist, Tyrus Wong. So you can see these are, you know, kind of, it's a little bit of an adaptation of kind of more traditional Chinese art, or the Song Dynasty, of which Tyrus was primarily inspired by. But the kind of the looseness of them, which works really well for animation as well. Oops, where did that? Just clicked on that. Where did that want to show? Right, so here's another one of his concept sketches. That the energy that we see in there, the wind blowing, because a big part of the Bambi story is that after Bambi's mother dies, he's sort of lost in the forest until he finds his friends, right? So let me see. Bambi is of course just a small part of what he accomplished. I just want to kind of quickly move forward here. How am I doing with... Whoa, time is flying. Okay. So, of course, right after he completes work on Bambi, there's a major strike, and the animators at Walt Disney and throughout Hollywood go on strike, which, hey, there's a writer's strike happening in Hollywood at this very moment, by odd coincidence. So there's a big strike, and after the strike is settled, Tyrus is fired. And I'm not exactly sure of this, but from what I've read, that he might have been one of, you know, they didn't hire... I mean, obviously when there's a strike, there's a bit of tension afterwards. And so Tyrus is let go after the strike ends, while a number of his white colleagues are hired back. Now, I'm not exactly sure of all that. That's a little bit disputed, but nevertheless, Tyrus manages to land on his feet, and he ends up working for Warner Brothers, the rival film studio, and he's there for another 26 years. So while that was probably very upsetting to him, and again, another sort of unfortunate moment in his career, he manages to land on his feet, and he ends up creating the designs, the production images for some of, again, the most famous movies in film history. Let me see if there's a list of... sorry, there should be a list. Let me just see. There is... Okay, so some of the stuff that he works on are Rebel Without a Cause, really one of the most famous movies that James Dean ever did. So Tyrus Wong is largely responsible for coming up with the look and the feel of that movie. I mean, how can you imagine how different history would be if Rebel Without a Cause looked differently or wasn't a smash hit and James Dean didn't become a cultural icon around the world in 80 Days, which was another, smash hit. Rio Bravo, that was a big John Wayne film. The Music Man, another huge musical hit. I'm not sure, PT 109, that's probably an illustration by Tyrus Wong there. The Great Race, The Wild Bunch, which was also, probably, if we didn't have The Wild Bunch, you wouldn't have Quentin Tarantino today. Like a very violent, kind of groundbreaking Western by Sam Peckinpah, which is, which was, it was extremely violent and kind of banned, but it was also a major touchstone in film history. So he does all of this work, kind of imagining what these movies are going to be like, storyboarding them, or not maybe necessarily all of them, but some of them. And so he retires from the film industry in the 1960s. So at the age of about 60 years old, at the end of the 60s, he retires. I think he's probably earned a good living and a retirement. But he doesn't just sort of quietly go away. He continues painting. He takes up ceramics, and he's making pottery. And one of the last kind of monumental things that he does with his life is he begins making kites. And there was a great documentary that was made, and let me see if I find the link to that. Of course, I can't play it here in Canada, but it was made by PBS on this American Masters series. And excellent. I actually saw this movie, I think it was at the Vancouver International Film Festival in 2015. And by the end of that movie, there was not a dry eye in the theater. It is an epic movie of someone overcoming obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and I've done a terrible job of outlining the various different things that he had to overcome as an Asian American in 1920s Hollywood, 1930s Hollywood, but you can hear from his own voice, because he died, I think, the year after the movie. He attended some of the early premieres, and but that movie is excellent. They also show a lot of footage of the kites that he made, because there's something so beautiful about this guy who is full of smiles, but yet had really one of the most difficult lives you can imagine, going all the way back to being separated from his mother and sister. And there just these kites that he had handmade, hand painted, hand sewed, flying over the beaches in Santa Monica. And there's something about these kites that it sort of represents, like, to me, this guy who is both at peace with life, and managed to overcome these I guess you'd say forces of nature, forces of terrible aspects of humanity, and yet is flying high, is sort of going with the wind, and seeing where it takes him, and sort of blowing, but he's still kind of in control. He's sort of managing all of these currents, but staying positive, keeping his humanity and his dignity throughout all of it, and overcoming. I mean, there were, again, go back to him being a janitor in college while all the rest of his buddies, or maybe not, or bullies maybe, are off, doing all sorts of other things, going to bars and restaurants that he wouldn't have been allowed to go into. And we don't know many of those people. They're lost to history. They certainly didn't achieve what he achieved. And I just think, I mean, if you watch the documentary, just this little guy, you know, little old man, because at the time he's like 100 years old and he's flying these kites over the beach, and you're just like, wow, like, yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap up here. But such an inspiring, such an huge. I mean, I play the trailer to this film to my students at Emily Carr University every semester because we start talking about overcoming obstacles and all these kinds of things. And so I kind of play this to them. It's like, you think you've got things difficult, check out this guy, and this guy was able to be successful and to live a productive life. Take inspiration from Tyrus Wong. There's no better person out there for you to be inspired by. So, having said all of that, is there anything else that I want to mention? Oh, there has been a few exhibitions of Tyrus's work over the years. The Hammer Museum at UCLA in Los Angeles has a significant collection of his work, as does Walt Disney. And you can see here's today's painting in their collection. Obviously, this was an exhibition that was up for a short period of time, but probably it wouldn't surprise me. There's George Lucas is building the Museum of Narrative Art right next to USC in kind of not too far from MacArthur Park, and it won't surprise me if there's going to be a number of Tyrus Wong's, there should be anyway, of his work on display in that museum when it opens, which maybe it's getting pretty close. Wow, so many comments. Oh, the Sandra's there. Tuned in just in time. Never saying gonna do this later. Yeah, Sandra says Otis is now by the airport. Yeah, totally. And Sanket says, hello, Michael. Remember. And Dark Winter says, hi. So I just wanted to share with you this book. So this is the only book here in the Vancouver Public Library that I was able to find on today's artist, Tyrus Wong. It is an excellent book. I've been reading it to our daughter every night for the past few weeks. Beautifully illustrated book here by Julie Long and Chris Sasaki. Julie Long. And one thing I you know, as I said, it's a beautiful book, but one thing I would just like to point out is it irks me that this is the only book on Tyrus Wong in the entire collection of the museum, or of the public library here in Vancouver. And we have a huge Chinese-Canadian population here. Tyrus Wong there should be dozens of books of Tyrus in the Vancouver Public Library collection. And the fact that there's only one book and it's for children, I think is a little bit embarrassing. And so what I would encourage anybody watching today is to contact their library and say, there should be some books. There's lots of great books on Tyrus Wong that you can order off of Amazon. Your public library should have more than just one book, and it shouldn't be just a book for children, because Tyrus Wong, as I said, is literally one of the most influential and important Asian American artists in history, if not the most. That's what I believe anyway. Again, there's lots of other like Chi Bai Chi, incredible modern Chinese artist whose paintings we did maybe a couple of years ago. you know, is one of the best-selling, his paintings have the record currently for the most expensive painting created by a Chinese person at auction. But Tyrus Wong, you know, without him, we wouldn't have Bambi. We wouldn't have Rebel Without a Cause. We wouldn't have James Dean. We wouldn't have Wild Bunch. Therefore, we wouldn't have Quentin Tarantino. I mean, it's once those connections disappear, you just think about how different history would have been. Anyway, rant is over. Just my encouragement, if you want to do a letter writing campaign, I would support that 100%. So let's move into the next step here. Okay, I think we want to do just a little bit of an underpainting here, just so that we don't lose some of the details. Perhaps. Now, you don't have to do this. I just think it might be helpful. So I'm just going to quickly put some paint on my palette. And if you're just joining us, I covered what these paints are earlier on in the episode. And of course, there's timestamps that you can jump to help yourself find that. Oh, it's like, where did my cool blue go? The one I was just using. And my white. So notice I didn't put any black down there because I'm going to be mixing black on my own. Oh. Okay, so I got my 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues. Warm, 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 cool, cool, cool. Cool. So, to make our black, I'm going to take some cool blue, and I think I'm going to do this over here. I'm going to take some warm red, mix that up. So I mix this together. Right now it's looking kind of greenish. But once I get all that yellow mixed in, the red is going to cancel that green, and then we got a black. Now it doesn't even have to be a perfect black anyway, just because we're just using this as a placeholder to kind of create something where we can find some lines a little bit later on. So, which brush? I'm going to use this very, well, maybe it's a little bit too small. Okay, so really my goal here is just to kind of identify where the deer is, so that if when I do my background here it gets a little bit obscured, I'll be able to find it. I'm not even going to do those horns. Just going to paint these branches. Now, obviously, Tyrus wouldn't have done this kind of thing because he probably just painted this painting very intuitively. He probably just started painting it and figured out the composition as he was working. I mean, he might have done some sketches, but I think, you know, he was such an accomplished artist that he wouldn't have needed to do this kind of thing. This is mostly for our purpose because doing this can be a little bit tricky without, you know, unless you feel confident about being able to draw your lines back. Now, you know, maybe I'll put this, build that texture up just a bit more. Okay. Just checking that the nanny's got our daughter okay. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna blow dry this here. Okay, so you can see what I was doing when I'm blow drying it. I'm rubbing my fingers over. Is I'm trying to get any of the paint that might be dry on the surface, but still have some wet paint inside to kind of pop like a little bit of a zit, right? Just smear it out and smudge it. Now, obviously, I could let it dry for an hour, and so then I get a little bit more texture, which would be helpful. But one thing I don't want is to be painting, and then let's say to pop one of these paint zits, and then that color, this dark black, to mix into those colors. That would be, you know, pretty frustrating for that to happen. So really, I'm doing that for time. It's also like, you know, if I get paint on a table, you know, maybe I've got like some paper on the table, I'll just kind of smear it and smudge it. So, because if it's just a blob there, you know, maybe it gets on my sleeve, or it gets on the painting, or my pants, or if I smear it out and turn it into a thinner surface area, it'll dry very quickly, and then it won't be such a problem anymore. Same thing, you know, sometimes maybe you see me wiping paint off onto my clothes. One thing I do, if I do that, is then just sort of just, you know, smear that paint around so that it's, you don't just have a big glob of paint, which is then going to rub off onto your car seat or something, right? Okay, now let's go to the next step. Okay, so step number, I don't know, 3, 4, wherever we're at, is to paint our background. Now, we could just probably keep this as it is right now, but I think I want to do just a little bit more work on the background. I want to give a little bit of this fade from the, let's get these side by side. I want to get a little bit of the fade of the kind of the white coming up, and then we'll have the cool blue darkening. Now, I could put a bit more of a warm blue over top of that, but the one thing is that could create a little bit more of a conflict. So I really want to put my warm blue down here in the foreground. And while this does appear to be a warmer sky, I don't think it's anywhere near as warm as down here. So it's possible that once we get another layer of cool blue over top of this, that it'll appear darker and therefore maybe even a little bit warmer. So, what we want to do is we're going to prep some cooler color down on the bottom, or white down at the bottom, and blue at the top. And then we're going to go over top and we're going to kind of blend them together. So let's might need a bit more paint here. So to help with this process, let's see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add. Actually, you know what? I haven't used slow dry medium in a while. I was going to use glazing fluid, but glazing fluid is basically is maybe more useful for thinner applications of paint. So I probably didn't need to. I don't know if I need all of that blue. So let's take this paint. Ooh, it's gonna be dark. Maybe I don't want it to be. Do I want it to be that dark? Let's see. Actually, not so bad. So I'm gonna put this up top. I gotta work kind of quick here. And maybe let's even put a bit of this in there. Let's maybe take just a little bit of blue. I don't know if I want it pure white. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. I might let this dry or blow dry that and then put my blue back over top. think that's pretty good. So I'm gonna clean this brush because I want to put more cool blue without any paint, any white in it at the very top. Maybe, do I want to add any? Maybe I'll put a touch of warm blue in there. Well, let's see. That it might have been good to have done that a little bit earlier, but I'm gonna blow dry this. Now there is that slow dry medium that I mixed into here. The reason I put that in there is if I tried blending that without any medium, the paint would start to dry very quickly. As it gets thin, it starts to dry. Just remember, I was just describing smearing the paint to make it thin so that it would dry fast and not get on my clothes. Well, that's a good thing in that instance, but in this process, that could be super frustrating because you start getting that paint starts to kind of seize up, and therefore it won't blend anymore. And then you start peeling the paint off, and it just will drive you absolutely bonkers. So that's this Liquitex Slow Dry Medium that I just applied here. Right? So that is particularly helpful for this type of a task. Right? Okay. Okay, so let's just blow dry that. Okay, so you can see it's still a little bit darker in places, and that's where the paint is still a little bit thicker. So I'm going to do this again with just a little bit more cool blue. Kathy, nice to see you in the chat there. Kathy says, no yellow Imprimatura. Well, you know, one of the reasons also why I didn't do that is because if I painted that warm yellow over it, especially doing this, what I'm doing here, it's likely that there, especially these areas where it's a little bit thinner, that yellow might come through a bit, and therefore I might have to do the same blending technique twice over top. And since so much of, you know, there's all that white in there, it might actually end up being more frustrating than it's worth. Ex Nihilo Studio says, "Hi, I'm Pepe, and I'm in the Netherlands. I've been doing some old tutorials, and I just want to say thanks for all the content, in particular the color theory ones." Awesome. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Pepe. It makes me so happy that people use those episodes and they find them helpful, and yeah, it's very meaningful to me. I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to put a little bit more of this just to make it a little bit thinner, and if I want to do any blending here, it gives me just that little bit of extra option. Now I do have to be careful that, you know, if I get any lower than this area, then I might make a hard line here, and you know, I almost hesitate to say that because I'm like, oh geez, it's exactly what's just about to happen, right? Because that's where the paint starts to. I was blending some of that paint together from the white, right? So this is basically just covering up some of those thinner patches of the blue up top. And then I can kind of just do a bit of a dry brush down here, like, oh, I don't know, maybe that's exactly what I don't want to happen here. I might just add a little bit of water on my brush there. So we'll see. It looks streaky right now. My hope is that when I blow dry it, that will disappear, especially right up in here. We'll see. Okay. So this, I can still see some of areas I'm not so happy with, but I'm pretty sure that that is going to, it's still very wet because I can see when I tilt this that it's still, I don't even want to touch it. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit, yeah, it's still a bit tacky there. And I'm touching it there because I know I'm going to cover that with some of the flowers on the trees here shortly. But either way, if there's little areas that are patchy, well, Bob Ross would just put a tree there, right? Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, there's gonna be a big tree right here. You can see shortly. So any kind of problems, well, we just make the tree a little bit bigger. Now that didn't quite go away as I wanted. I could continue blending and I'll spend all day doing that, but yeah, good enough for government work, as my grandfather used to say. There is some super sweet comments in the chat there, and I'm super grateful to hear this. Afro Literature says, thank you, watching from Ghana. Oh my goodness, that's so cool. That's so neat. Sankeet says, me too, Pepe. I completed Michael's course, and now I'm the #1 drawer in my class. Oh my goodness, that is so cool. That makes me so happy that you picked up those skills, and now you're putting them to use, and now you're the best artist in your class. That is so cool. Sanju says, hello all. Sanju says, I wish I knew Michael when I was back in high school. I'm sure I would have loved art. Sankeet says, Michael, I have a problem of judgments in drawing. Can you tell me, can I face it? The problem of judgments in drawing, can you tell me, can I face it? I'm not sure if I understand exactly what you're saying, but do you mean that you find yourself, you're not happy with your drawings and that you are judging your drawings, or you're having a hard time judging your drawings, the success of your drawings? Maybe let me know a little bit more specifically in the comments. I'm going to be doing another feedback episode. I think maybe is it next week? Might be next weekend. So let me know so that and post any artwork you're not happy with, especially because those are the ones I can help people most with. Yeah, so join the Facebook group and upload some artwork there. Sanju says, yes, it's so much effective. Well, I think the more you draw, the better you're going to get, and you just have to sort of accept that, as I always tell people, that even the greatest artists of all time don't make great art all the time, right? So, maybe, Picasso, for instance, is a great example. Yeah, there's some great Picasso paintings, and we've done many of them here on the channel, but there's also a lot of really bad Picassos out there. He once had the record for the most amount of art that had been produced and sold, and someone beat him by making drawings on little post-it notes and then selling those in the New York subway for $1 a piece, right? So there is a lot of horrible, ugly, terrible Picasso artwork out there, but he just kept on going because the more you create, the odds are the more good stuff you're going to make. Another analogy I use is to baseball. The best baseball players of all time were only successful about 35% of the time. They only hit the ball 35% of the time. So think about that. Like, if you hit the ball 30% of the time, you would be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. If you hit the baseball 25% of the time, you're still one of the best players on your team. If you hit the ball 20% of the time, you're still good enough to make it to the major leagues and make $20 million a year, right? So, the thing about, even the greatest artists, even myself, I'm not saying I'm one of the greatest artists, but, when I'm making art, if I make 10 paintings and 3, 4, 5 of them are good enough to show and sell people, I'm super happy. I'm not sitting there thinking like, oh, how come the other 5 didn't turn out? I'm thinking like, wow, I've got 5 paintings that somebody might want to own and put on their wall. Like, that's amazing, right? And, if I could make one that would go on the Museum of Modern Art's wall and their collection and their website, and that would be a dream. But I might have to make 1,000 paintings before I can make that one that's really good. So it's a matter of playing the odds, making enough work, not getting frustrated when every artwork doesn't turn out the way you want. Because sometimes the art that you make, it might not be what you want it to do, but it might be better than what you wanted it to do. But sometimes we don't even know that at the time. We're just like, oh, it didn't turn out the way I wanted. Ugh, I'm not very good. And then you show it to a friend and they're just like, wow, that's incredible. I'll buy it off you. And you're like, yeah, but it's not good. It's not the way I wanted it to be. And they're just like, well, I don't really care what you wanted it to be because it's the way I want it. I want to buy it. Right? So, the saying always goes is that an artist is their own worst critic. And we're often way harder on ourselves than anybody would ever be. Right? Like, I look at this and I'm like, I wish that was perfect. I wish that was perfect. Meanwhile, there's some other people maybe painting right now who are just like, oh, I wish it could be as good as Michael's. Oh, and then there's people painting next to those people who, I wish I could do it as well as so and so, right? And sometimes it's hard for us to appreciate the things that we've done ourselves, right? So Pepe says, I work a lot and I'm alone as an immigrant here in the Netherlands, so going to art class is not really an option. So these tutorials are really an amazing tool. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, Sanju says the best art teacher. Okay, you guys are making me blush here. I really appreciate that. So I thank you. I want to move on to the next step here though. Okay. So, oops. So let's go and start putting some details into the foreground, and then we can also cover up maybe stuff that we're not so happy with in the background, if that is the case with your painting. So let's look at the original here and think about where we want to start. I think probably the next step is to paint this tree, and the reason why I want to paint that tree first is we can paint that and then paint the leaves, the pink leaves over top. And then probably one of the last things, and then maybe we'll paint the deer here, Bambi, and then we'll paint the rocks and then the grass over top. Right? And then maybe the leaves are the very final thing. Not sure. We'll have to think about that as we get closer to it. Sankeet says that will help. Good. Awesome. You guys are so nice. Okay. Let's see. So, basically, remember we mixed this black earlier on? Right? So we can use that black that we used for underpainting, and you can see the reason why I painted that underpainting is, if I had just left these as pencil lines, I wouldn't be able to see any of that, right? So putting the underpainting there allows me to see. Now there's a few places maybe it's harder to see, but not being able to see that little part is not as difficult, as problematic as if I couldn't see any of those lines. So for this tree, what I'm probably going to do is add some bit of a warmer blue into this mixture. Just to kind of help propel this tree forward. Now, black is always going to move very forward, but I just want to maybe even take a little bit of the black down a notch. So because the tree is not right in the front, it's still a little bit closer to the middle ground. So I don't want that black to be too dark, because if I do want to actually use black, I want to be able to have a slight difference. So that's my black, and this is my really dark warm blue. You can see I put a significant amount of warm blue in there. So now it has a bit more of what color? It's like a really deep navy blue, like a really, really dark jeans. That's kind of what that looks like to me. Right, which is the kind I like. I like really dark blue jeans. So let's put these side by side. Oops. There we are. And so you can see it's a little bit transparent, and that's okay. It doesn't surprise me, though. I find blue is often a little bit transparent. Okay. Also, as I paint this, look at how I'm going to hold my paintbrush. Kind of a little bit further away, and what that does, it's going to make it makes me lose a little bit of control, but that's perfect for painting trees, because we want that kind of scraggly look. Scraggly, is that a word? Now there is a little bit of a highlight on this tree, but I'm going to paint that afterwards. do this tree over here. I'm going to move the tree over just a little bit from the edge. Oops. Okay, and I'm just going to go back over to the top. Actually, you know what? Maybe what I'm going to do next is just take a little bit of this. Actually, maybe let's just use this paint right here. Use a little bit of white. That's getting a little bit sticky, even though it's got slow dry medium in there. It's starting to dry down because it's pretty thin. So I'm going to add just a little bit of matte medium. So matte medium is just transparent paint. It's what's in most paint. It's just instead of using water, I'm using matte medium, and that just gives it a bit more life back into this paint. Okay, so now I'm just going to paint over top of the right side. I'm not worried about paint mixing together here either. Okay. Now let's take a little bit more of our black. I'm just going to do a slight darker version of this. Actually, I'm going to put a bit of glazing fluid in there. You don't need to do all this, and I'm sure probably most people don't have all three of these mediums. I'm just using that to thin it out, and also maybe a bit of blending opportunities here. Oops, that's not really there at all, is it? Well, now it is. Okay. And maybe I'm going to blow dry that, actually. Yeah, let's do that real quick. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my my dark blue that I used for the trees originally. I'm just going to go back over mostly kind of the center. Because this is the darkest part of the tree that faces away from the light, which appears to be sort of coming maybe from the side and maybe even from the front, kind of as if Bambi is looking down into the valley. It's kind of a glow. And so, of course, there's a decision to be made as to which branches are in front of which branches. And each person's going to see that a little bit differently, which I think is great. Okay, so excuse me. I think the next step here is I want to start painting the hill, and I'm going to use some of my, I'm going to take my cool blue, or my warm blue, sorry, my warm blue, and some white. Maybe a little bit of my gray, so it's not just pure white. See how it looks a little bit purpley, right? That's a sign that your color is warmer. If it has it, especially add white to it and it looks a little purpley. Let's take a bit more white. take maybe more blue. I'm not really looking at the original just yet. I'm just putting paint in place. For better or worse. Okay, let's take some of the darker, my black and blue. Going for these sort of a bit of hard edges where we see kind of like rock qualities. Again, I'm not really looking at the original, I kind of glance up, okay. So often I want some of these, the darkest areas, to be directly next to some lighter areas. I guess it's a little bit different than the original here now to look at it, but that's okay. Okay. Wow, I can't understand what some of these what you guys are talking about in the chat there. I'm not even sure what language that is. Okay. I'm feeling great about where I am at this stage of the painting. It's going to change radically when we start putting those pinks in, because they're going to really kind of bridge a bit of that gap between these two blues, give it that purple quality, which is going to, you know, is I think is one of the gorgeous things about that painting. Obviously, we're going to put some green grass down there in the bottom, but I think we got a pretty solid foundation. Oops, there we go with that. Those trees over here. You know, if I was really unhappy with maybe what had happened here, I could just grow those trees up a little bit. But I'm okay. I can live with it. So I have a little bit of tea here while I You know what, let's do the star next. I haven't done that, so let me go back to the background. Okay, so I'm happy with the way the painting is evolving. Still not done, or even, well, I'd say maybe halfway, a little over halfway. But I want to get the star in the background, so that's why I'm jumping back to this stage here. So in the background, there's this beautiful little star that's kind of illuminating the sky. Probably, I guess maybe that's where that light is coming from. That makes some sense, doesn't it? I thought it was from like the valley below, but it's that star that's illuminating things. So maybe that is why we don't see shadow on that side. Anyway, it's okay. I mean, I could change this to put the highlights on the left side of the tree over here, so that the light, as it's coming down, yeah, maybe let's do that while I've got paint on my palette here. So it's okay to change your mind. And there's Lolly. That's awesome. We got the whole band back together. Okay, and we're going to cover that top part with bushes. So. Okay, I'm just gonna hit this with the blow dryer real quick, and then we're gonna get the star. Just don't want to get my sleeve over top of everything. Oh, and there's Heidi in the chat. Hi everyone, this looks so interesting. I hope you're all doing well. Vancouver's heating up to 30 degrees the next 2 days. That's like 75 or so, what, 78? Approaching 80, I think, degrees Fahrenheit. Awesome. Okay, I want to get to the start. Okay, bumbling around here. Okay, so let's look at these two side by side. So how do we want to go about that? I think what I'm going to do is a little bit of glazing. So I'm going to take my glazing fluid. And get some of that on my brush. And then take some white. So this is going to be a thinner, it's not going to be pure brilliant white, it's going to be a little bit more transparent, which is what I want. And in fact, let's... Now I could blend that out a little bit. I think I'm just going to keep it kind of a little bit stronger on there. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry that. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a little bit of cool yellow, a bit of cool yellow, and just mix a bit of that on here as well. Maybe I could have done this first, but so I'm not going all the way to the tips of the star, just kind of about halfway or 3/4 of the way. Now I'm just taking a little bit more yellow. And then I'm just going to blow dry. So I'm just going to get even more intensely yellow. Okay. And then blow dry that. And then lastly, I'll take some pure white. it's kind of hard to see, but that little bit of actual white right in the middle makes it look even brighter. You know, if we keep putting yellow, yes, we're going to have like that yellow star, but because it's white, it makes it look like it's just super intense. You know, maybe while I've got a little bit of this yellow on here, I'm going to take a bit of yellow, and it's got a little bit of that glazing fluid. I'm going to put a bit of it on the trees and things nearby. Now, this is not what he did, but since I've got this paint mixed up, I don't think it's entirely out of line to use it in this way. Even putting just a little bit on some of these rocks. Now that I think about it, I mean, this is like probably in a way a bit of a New Year's painting, right? In that we have this kind of the new star coming over the horizon. So let's see. So we're just texting with the nanny. Okay. I like that so far. I mean, I'm happy. We could just walk away right now. I mean, but there's still a little bit to do here. We've got obviously Bambi, or the deer, and maybe it's not necessarily Bambi, but I think he's probably doing a little wink wink back to his own history there. And obviously the leaves on the trees. I think maybe we should do Bambi next. I feel like if we save that to the end, you know, yeah, so I'm just going to quickly hit this with the blow dryer, then we'll move on. Heidi says the first Dragon Boat Regatta is this Saturday. Ooh, really? That sounds awesome. Okay, I'd love to take our daughter to see that. That would be so cool. I just came back from the airport. I will start at some point. Michael's such a good teacher. Oh my goodness, you guys. Heidi says, I don't think I've seen anyone with more patience than Michael. Wondering if Michael is as patient doing other stuff. I like to think so. I think making art definitely helps develop patience. I think you have to be patient when you're making art or learning art, because there's so many setbacks that just naturally come up. No matter how much planning you think you can do, or that you do, there's always something that goes wrong. And I think that's a great metaphor for life. You can plan all day long, and as the saying goes, man plans, God laughs, right? So I think part of making art is learning to kind of roll with the unexpected and to deal with some of those surprises, and even better embrace them, right? Bob Ross, The Happy Accident. I say it all the time. I know not everybody's a fan of Bob Ross, but at the very least, I think that is an exceptional concept that he introduced. Well, maybe he didn't entirely. It's not like he came up with it on his own, but that idea of the mistake being an opportunity, I think, is absolute genius, and one of his great contributions to art and philosophy, maybe even. And there's Believe Jesus is giving a hand up, fist up. Awesome. Sankeet says, it's 1:27 a.m. here. Still watching this live stream because it's interesting. Oh, whereabouts are you, Sankeet? That it's 1:27. My goodness, you're on the other side of the planet. It's, what time is it even here? It's 1:03 p.m. here in Vancouver. So you're literally on the opposite side of the world. That's so cool. I just think technology, that's so cool. That's so neat. Okay. Christine says, Bob Ross is a really great painter. Yeah, Bob Ross, in particularly the style that he's painting, was a master at it. I would say, oddly enough, Bob Ross's style, or his approach to painting, is quite complex. Maybe unexpectedly. Like, I did a couple of Bob Ross paintings a few years ago. I'd never painted in that style, and was like, wow, this is harder than I expected it to be. I thought we could do it in half an hour just like he does, and then you're like 3 hours later, I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, Lolly says, I'm imagining Michael being a totally impatient maniac when not painting, the complete opposite of the calm, patient Michael we all know and love. Well, that's possible. That's possible. Okay, so let's move on to our next step here. I want to paint Bambi herself, or maybe it's not Bambi, maybe it's Billy or Barbara deer, I mean, but I think it's probably Bambi. Call back to the series of artworks he did for Walt Disney back in the 40s that were really his breakthrough in terms of his career. So let's look at the here, and let's zoom in. Actually, maybe I should have mixed this paint first, but okay, so that the deer, in fact, well, let's come down here. So what we want is we want to start with some warm yellow, because really the base of it is mostly kind of an orangey yellow. It's a brown, but so I think we're going to make a few different versions of this brown. So we'll have one that is much darker. And I think it's important to see kind of like how I even mix these paints. So we can see the, we have yellow, orange, darker red here. Because that's going to go to a much deeper brown. And then now I'm going to take some of my warm blue. Let's mix the warm blue right in here, actually. It's going to make this go much darker. And then we can just mix that up. Take it from orange into brown. A little bit lighter. Now, I have to paint over top of this blue, so I'm actually going to take a bit of white and just mix that up over here so that I can paint just a quick little layer of that brown over top of that area, because otherwise I might be kind of frustrated with how dark this brown goes right off the top. So let's take this brown that I just mixed, this lighter one, with the white in it. And see how even with that white in there, it's starting to get kind of darker? So that's why this is such a helpful, useful little technique here. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly blow dry that. Oh my goodness. Too funny, you guys. Okay, so let's take, I'm going to take my lighter brown, almost kind of orangey brown. I'm just going to go over top of this. I think I'm just going to wipe a bit of that leg away. I want to keep those legs maybe a little bit lighter, especially the front legs. Okay. Maybe while I'm right here, I'm going to take a bit of white. Just took the same color, just added a bit of white to it. And painting the belly there. Okay. Maybe take a little bit more yellow on the brush. It's not the white nor the brown from before. Okay. And there's Lisa. It says, love watching you paint here from the States. Awesome. Good to see you again, Lisa. Sankeet says, I used to be so impatient, like my mind was not able to imagine or think one thing, but since I started drawing and other arts, now my mind is so peaceful it feels like I got what I wanted. That's awesome. Wally says, it's taken me a long time to figure it out. I wish I'd learned a long time ago. Stress creates more stress, and then you feel like you're going to explode. Stay positive, and nothing can really get to you. Look at this. Look at all the wisdom you guys are dropping. I love it. Okay, so now let's go the other way. We've got some of these lighter browns. Let's go to some darker browns. Remember we mixed this fella up earlier. Right, so this is the same brown, just added more red, more warm red and more warm blue to the mixture, which makes your brown just get darker and darker and darker. And one of the things we often see is the way that light works is often the darkest, like a sphere. Sometimes the darkest part is not, let's say the light's coming maybe kind of from above or from the front, let's say. That doesn't mean that the backside is going to be perfectly black. Often we have reflected light. Oh, I can't really demo this as well as I'd like. Well, actually, you might have a bright spot on the front, but the darkest part is not usually the backside. It's a little bit kind of towards the center. It's sort of like they say it's darkest before sunrise, right? Which is also a great kind of metaphor. It's always sort of seems to be the worst right before it gets better, right? In that, because the intensity of the light, on the earth, it creates these really intense shadows, and so it can actually be lighter as the sun rises, and then it gets darker, and then lighter again. This is one of those weird quirks, but the reason I mention that is same sort of thing here, so we can see, I mean, obviously Tyrus Wong is an absolute master, so he's got, these right up on the back where the intensity of that light is. It's also like the darkest part, right? Which is almost a little bit counterintuitive. We always, I think, seem to think that the darkest part is the furthest away from the light, but often it's the exact opposite. So I'm just going to also go back to my lighter brown. I'm just going to put this, again, just like I said, a little bit back, and lighten it back up a bit. Okay, I'll take a bit of black. Do I have any black left? A little bit from the very beginning, from our underpainting, but we don't need much, which is good. Oh, I do have to do the antlers. Oops. Maybe I do have to mix more black. Or maybe... You know what? I think I'm gonna have to mix a little bit more black. I was gonna see if I could get away without it, but it's not that big of a deal, Michael. Oh, I guess I gotta make a bit more blue on here. So close, just for a couple tiny little brush strokes, but let's take our cool blue, cool yellow, and warm red. Well, I guess I need it for the grass and stuff too, so it's not a waste of time or anything. So it's kind of changing colors. It was a little bit brown, that's why I added a bit more blue to it, and now we've got our black again. It also makes it so much easier to do fine details when we've got fresh paint. I'm trying to do those little tiny details with a brush or paint that's like all dried up. It's just maddening. How much do I want to do here? Just a little bit of a tiny speck for the nose there. Okay. Now, I wonder what I want to do next. What's my... Do I want to do the... grass? That feels great. I mean, again, I could be really happy with this at this stage because this sort of looks like a wintry scene. The one thing that I'm not so happy with is the tips of these branches, which are kind of sloppy because I always intended to put flowers growing on all those tips. So right now, it looks a little bit clunky to me because a lot of that's going to be covered up. So if I was expecting to leave those blank, like it's winter, then I would probably have spent a little bit more time and been a little bit more careful there. I think I want to do the grass next. So he's using a bit of a cool green here. I guess I need more cool. So he's taking a cool blue and a cool yellow. Let's just see how green we want to make this. That's pretty good. I'm just going to take the rest of this because we're going to need a bigger batch. And let's take, I'm just going to take a bit of gray and black. To mute that green a bit, give it a bit more of a racing green kind of color. Maybe it's just try and take a bit of that. Ooh, it's almost a bit much. Yeah, I have to be very careful putting white in there because then that. Yeah, I almost wonder if, well, it's okay. Okay. Now, where did I put my, there's my brush. I'm going to put glazing fluid in here, and a fair amount, so that I can get a really kind of almost watery, or not watery, but just a more fluid-like brush stroke. And also just maybe a little bit more transparent, because it is grass, so maybe I don't want it to be, you know, super opaque, and I want it to maybe feel like it's disappearing, not trying to take up all of our attention there in the foreground. Michael, will you make an acrylic painting course? I have done an acrylic painting course. I've done it a few times. So there's, if you look at the very beginning of the playlist for the Master Study series, that's the updated version of my acrylic painting course. And I did do an entire painting course before that that doesn't use any of these templates. I just show you how to draw everything. So sometimes some people like that a lot, and some people found that was, you know, too much drawing and it was too hard for them. So feel free to look at both of those. You can find them both on my YouTube channel. which is you're watching right now. Sen Keith says, what should I do for accuracy in painting? Well, it's again, it's just like drawing. It's a matter of practicing. I would say that your first, step is to not worry so much about accuracy. Is just playing with the colors, trying to kind of understand how to use them and mix them. Look at some of the early paintings we did where it's not so important that you have perfect brush strokes and everything lines up nice and perfectly. It's just sort of playing with the paint, and the more that you enjoy playing with the paint, the more likely you're going to invest time into getting better and better at it. But there are so many different artists out there, which is one of the reasons why I like to do these master study episodes, is that we're looking at artists from all over the world throughout history, and every artist uses paint a little bit differently. So sometimes, people have an idea of like, oh, a good painting is the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. And they try to paint that and they're just like, oh, it doesn't look like very good. Well, maybe there's two things. Maybe if you tried painting it again and you take some more lessons and you practice, you'll get better at painting something like the Mona Lisa. Or either, maybe the Mona Lisa is not really the kind of style that's best for you. Maybe you want a more expressive, wild, drippy, splattery style. And you might not think that's the kind of art you like or that you're the best at. But it's the kind of thing that might come easiest to you and you might do the best job at. So I think it's just a matter of just playing and experimenting and falling and making mistakes and not worrying so much about getting it perfect. So maybe I should zoom in here. I'm almost tempted to use a different technique here. The one that I rarely use. So one technique is we can use another brush that's often got, like, this is like a very like a grassy, or I think it's made of like grass, this brush. And we can use that to kind of get these more grassy kind of rather than trying to paint each individual brushstroke. Is that in focus? So maybe I don't need. Maybe I shouldn't have used such. Oops, where did that go? Okay, now I'm just going to mix some of the darker paint, my black into here. I want to try to make sure this is a relatively dry brush. Okay, now it's going to take just black all by itself. And I'm just going to complement that with just a little bit of actual painting here. Now, obviously, Tyrus was, you know, undisputed master. I bet you he did this entire painting in probably 45 minutes or less. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it's not perfect, but you know what? I think I'm going to leave that. And you know, we'll just back out a bit. Oops. Ooh, okay, I gotta wrap up soon here. Okay. And then all that little dappling of... okay, so now we're going to do the... all of these guys. Okay, so what should we do first? I think we just do the white first. Looks almost like that's what he did anyway. And I'm going to put a bit of matte medium in here just because my white paint is starting to... it's been on the palette here for a while. Yeah, look how dry... ooh. Actually, I think I'm just going to use some new paint. No sense in trying to fight with paint. Now, the one thing is that this is heavy body paint, which is much thicker. So this is a different brand. This is Opus brand paint, which is a lot like Gamblin, more professional grade of paint. So it's got a different texture than the rest of the paint I've been using. Is what we call soft body paint, which is one step above a fluid acrylic. So it makes it's easier to paint with more fluid paints, or it's, well, you have more of that brushable kind of quality. The thicker it is, the more you can kind of get goopier textures, but it can be kind of a little bit frustrating at times. So, in fact, just to speed things up, Okay. So that's, you know, it looks a little bit sloppy, but that's okay, because I just wanted to, if I was trying to do all those little dots by hand, that would take me an extra 20 minutes, right? But so here now I can just sort of go and refine them and build around the outer edges of these. Let's go to a different view here. And you just want to be very careful, maybe if you want to use a blow dryer to speed up the drying time, because you don't want to get any fingerprints all over the back ground here. That could be super frustrating. So you see how, like, I find a place where I can just anchor my pinky down? I find that helpful. Certainly you could just rotate the canvas around and paint on the you know, rest your hand on the table or that kind of stuff. But then every time I come up, I just take a quick little look at my pinky. Do I have any paint on this pinky finger? So when I anchor it down, I'm not making a big splotch. I love how he's got these like little bits of the like flower petals just falling off in the night, drifting away, falling to the ground. Okay, let's just take a quick look at that. So what I want is a little bit more of these, you see how the leaves kind of make these kind of almost like fingers? I just want to emphasize a bit more of that. Okay. Now, let's make her pink. Now that looks like a cool pink. So let's just try mixing that up. I think that's pretty good. Now we could use a few different value levels of this pink. One with maybe the actual red and some with, but he looks like he's just used one pink. Well, maybe there's a couple. Yeah, maybe we'll go a little slightly darker. But what I do want to do is just quickly blow dry that. So this time I'm not going to use that other brush to really quickly layer in some of this pink, because this is the top layer, and you know that kind of looks sloppy until we cover it. So here we don't want any of that sloppiness on top. And you don't have to worry about making these all like little perfect ovals or circles. One thing is that, remember, most people are never going to look at your painting as carefully as you're looking at it. And what looks maybe sloppy to you isn't going to even register for most people. Doesn't mean that you should, you know, just be totally careless, but it just means that you don't have to worry about being perfect and being so hard on yourself about not doing it quote unquote correctly. You know, so for instance, let's say every once in a while a brush starts to get a little bit clogged. I just wipe that away and try to spin it, kind of the bristles back into a bit of a point. That helps you get a little bit more accuracy back. And you can see there's parts of the trees that he did that are more exposed, and parts of it that on mine that are more exposed. Because, you know, once I get to this point, I'm not really gonna focus all my attention on making it exactly like his. I'm using it as inspiration, and if I get close, then that's good. If not, that's also okay. I'm not really sure what kind of tree this is supposed to be, because I know zero about plant life. I don't have a green thumb anywhere on my body, so I can't tell you the name of plants, but it does sort of to me look a lot like here in Vancouver we have the cherry blossoms. So I don't know if this is a cherry blossom tree. There's probably cherry blossoms in California where he was. I never really noticed it until I moved to Vancouver, because there's a lot of them and they're super beautiful, very photogenic trees in the spring. And then we have a cherry blossom festival here in Vancouver. All these pinks and yellows, or not pinks, pinks and whites, I mean. Now it does seem that the majority of the pink is on the left side of these trees, and that the white is on the right side. Oh, and then of course on this side, I just occurred to me it should be the opposite. We should have the pink on the right side here. And there's just a few little flower petals kind of scattered down here. Okay, let's zoom back out. Okay, and then now I'm just going to do one more version with a darker red. Darker cool red. Not just pure red, because that's going to be pretty... It'll show up like really, really dark compared to the original. So I kind of want it just to kind of fit in, and we won't do too many of them, maybe like 20 across the whole painting. Lively conversations in the chat. That's awesome. So one of the things here, just keep in mind that by doing this, you sometimes have like little peaks of paint, and if you're not careful, it might appear kind of just dry to the touch, but if you rest your hand on it, you might cause paint that's inside of it to bubble out, and then you start stamping it all over and you're not paying attention. Then you look, oh, I got all this dried paint, and well, Bob Ross says you've got to paint another tree there, right? So just be careful, right? As I say, most accidents happen when you're close to home. Right, when you're almost done and you're feeling like things are going great, that's where painting always wants to remind you of how human we all are. So really, how I'm making these decisions is I'm just looking around. Is there any areas that are kind of sloppy? You know, maybe I can drop a flower petal in those places. Okay. Good too, because my daughter's going to be back from the nanny any minute. So we're here at the end. I'm pretty excited about how this one turned out. This one was a real fun one, and I obviously am a huge fan of Tyrus Wong. I think he's just, should be far more well known than he is. So certainly watch that PBS documentary, and I think you should write to your library and ask them to stock some more or any books of Tyrus Wong. Just as a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when future episodes are coming up. Take a photograph of the painting you just made and upload it to our Facebook group. I think next or the weekend after, I'm doing a bonus feedback episode, so you want to get all your artwork in. I still have a bunch to catch up from in the past, so it'll be another long one. We'll get through all of our work and try to catch up to today as much as possible. You can also leave a donation through Super Chat, which takes 40% of what you donate, so consider using PayPal. You can donate 25 cents, $1, $50, whatever you want, or do an e-transfer. My email's on my website and the Facebook group, so great reason to join the Facebook group. So, let's take a look at how they turned out. And there's my version with the masters next to it there. Yeah, I think I really liked painting this one. This one was a lot of fun. I think, my trees appear to be a little bit more dense than his. He was able to get kind of a little more spots and make the leaves look a little bit smaller, whereas mine feel a little bit more clumpy, I suppose. Not that big of a deal, but maybe more my own style in there. The sky looks a little bit patchy in places. I was hoping that would dry away, but it's also not that bad. It kind of almost looks like just different colorations in the sky. Maybe like really, really deep clouds or something back there. So, also my star is certainly bigger than his. I didn't think it was going to be that much bigger than it is, but looking at them side by side, like, oh, that's much bigger. Oh, okay, interesting. So let's just let's go zoom in and just sort of explore around. Sandkeith says, finally I can sleep. Well, I appreciate you staying up this whole time to keep me company during the live stream. That's awesome. As I said, the star that he did is much smaller than mine. I kind of like how mine turned out. I feel like it makes sense with how kind of thick all my leaves are anyway, that everything would be a little bit bigger. I don't know, the original says it's basically the same size, even a little bit smaller than this. His is 8.5 by 12, and I'm on a 9 by 12 canvas. So, but he's probably, made of, this is watercolor, right? Maybe almost like a gouache as opposed to acrylic. So he's able to get a little bit more fine detail. Let's look down here. I don't know how my branch, the leaves should be there, and instead I put an extra branch, put it there. So it is what it is. I don't think anyone's going to complain. And again, I put a little bit of that cool yellow as on the tree there, just to give it that glow from the star, because I also put that yellow in the star itself. If we go down to the bottom here, I really like putting these little flower petals all over. It really kind of gives it that sense of like a new wind is, there's a new year about to begin, because of course this was on the January 1970 edition of Reader's Digest, so kind of their New Year edition. So the flower petals are coming off. And then let's just look at the deer in the center. I think it turned out pretty good. I'm just looking, now that I see it up close, I can see where I wiped away some of the paint. So it's a little bit clumsy there, but you know, it's pretty hard to see unless, you know, that's my fingernail. Unless you're really up close, you're not going to notice those little details, so that's okay. Yeah. You know, again, this looks, you can see it looks kind of sloppy up close, but who's ever going to get up this close to the painting? It would be nice if someone did, but you can't expect that kind of thing out of the audience. I mean, if this was something I was making for my own artwork that I was going to sell, or it was for a client or something, for a movie studio like Tyrus Wong did, well, I'd probably put a little bit more effort and I wouldn't try to get it done in 3 hours, right? There we go. There's another one. Another one down. Okay, folks, well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, morning, wherever you are. Some of you better get to sleep. It is past your bedtime. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. And until then, enjoy the rest of your week. I really appreciate you all. Thank you so much for all the generous comments. And we shall see you all again very soon. Good night, everybody.